Millionaire marries a ugly beggar for a bet, but what he discovers on their wedding night shocks him. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin our story. At the grandiose gala that evening, guests in their finest attire clinked glasses and laughed beneath the shimmering chandelier. But in the corner of the room, a man stood apart, his eyes fixed on something, or rather, someone, that no one else noticed. William Cartwright, a young millionaire whose wealth was the talk of the city, had everything he could ever want: luxury, power, and a reputation that most envied. Yet, tonight, something was missing. As he glanced around the room, his gaze fell on a woman sitting alone at the edge of the ballroom. Her clothes were simple, almost ragged compared to the sleek gowns surrounding her. She fidgeted with her napkin, clearly uncomfortable in such an extravagant setting. Her face, pale and tired, seemed out of place in this world of polished smiles and well-timed laughs. It was clear she didn't belong here. Her name was Claire, a woman whose life had been nothing but struggle. A former beggar, now given a rare opportunity to attend a prestigious event. She had been invited to the gala by a wealthy stranger, who seemed to find her story of hardship intriguing. But Claire wasn't here for the glitz and glamour. She was here for a chance to prove that she was more than just the poor woman she appeared to be. As she sat there, feeling out of place, she couldn't help but notice the tall man staring at her from across the room. He was dressed in an impeccable tuxedo, exuding wealth and confidence. He wasn't just anyone. He was William Cartwright, the man whose name had been on the lips of every high society member in the city. The millionaire who owned half the city's real estate. The man who had it all. But what Claire didn't know was that tonight, William wasn't just attending the gala for business. He was here for a bet, a challenge he had set for himself. One that would change everything. You see, William was bored. The wealth and power he had accumulated over the years had left him feeling empty. He wanted to prove something, not to the world, but to himself. So, when a friend dared him to marry the first person who caught his eye at the event, someone he thought was beneath him, he agreed. It was supposed to be a joke, a meaningless wager. But as he continued to stare at Claire, something inside him shifted. He had never met anyone like her before. She wasn't looking at him with awe or admiration, like the others did. Instead, she seemed indifferent. And that intrigued him. William approached her slowly, each step making her heart race in a way she couldn't explain. "Excuse me," he said, his voice smooth, yet filled with curiosity. "Are you here alone?" Claire looked up, startled. She was used to being invisible in crowds like this, but the way he was looking at her made her feel exposed, as though he could see straight through her. "Yes," she replied softly. "I'm just here to see the world from a different perspective." William chuckled, though it wasn't a mocking laugh. "It's a different world, that's for sure. You look out of place, but somehow. I find that fascinating." Claire didn't know how to respond. Was he mocking her? Or was there something else? Before she could say another word, William continued. "How about we make a deal? You marry me tonight, and I'll change your life forever." Claire froze, unable to believe what she was hearing. Was this some kind of joke? But William's serious expression told her it wasn't. There was no hesitation in his eyes. She could tell that he was serious. And somehow, she couldn't help but be drawn in by the possibility of what he was offering. But little did she know that one simple decision would lead to a revelation that would shatter everything she thought she knew about herself and the man who seemed to have it all. As Claire stood there, contemplating the offer that seemed too good to be true, she had no idea that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't even imagine. And as the evening unfolded, the truth about William Cartwright would come crashing down in the most unexpected way. As the night went on, the glamorous gala buzzed with the sound of laughter and conversation. But for Claire, everything seemed to blur into the background. She sat at the far edge of the ballroom, quietly observing the lavish displays of wealth around her. The ornate chandeliers above cast soft light, making the gold accents of the room shimmer. Yet, in this sea of opulence, Claire felt more alone than ever. Her fingers gently traced the rim of her glass, the reality of the bet weighing heavily on her mind. She had said yes, but now she wasn't sure if that was a mistake. William Cartwright, the man who had proposed to her in such a strange, casual manner, had simply walked away after the offer, leaving her standing there, trying to make sense of everything. She had no idea what to expect next. The evening was moving on without her, but in her mind, everything had come to a halt. The next few days went by in a blur. William made all the arrangements for their marriage, his lawyers, his team, everything happening so quickly that Claire could barely keep up. It felt surreal to her, like a dream she might wake up from any minute. But when the day of their wedding arrived, it was all too real. Claire, in her simple wedding dress, stood at the altar, looking up at William. His sharp suit and confident posture made him seem like the perfect groom, but she saw something else in his eyes, uncertainty. Maybe it was her own nerves, or maybe it was his, but the moment felt oddly intimate, despite the bargain they had struck. The ceremony was brief, almost too quick. Words were exchanged, vows were said, but it all seemed empty to Claire. She couldn't help but wonder, was this really what she had agreed to? But as she glanced at William, standing there beside her, she saw something unexpected in his eyes, a flicker of something more than just business. After the ceremony, the two were whisked away to a lavish hotel suite. It was everything Claire had never dreamed of: silk sheets, velvet curtains, and an immense bed that seemed to swallow her whole. She felt out of place, overwhelmed by the sudden change. William, on the other hand, was cool and collected. He had always been used to this kind of life, after all. The night dragged on with small talk and an awkward silence that seemed to grow between them with every passing minute. Claire couldn't stop wondering what had driven William to make such a bizarre bet. Was he truly intrigued by her, or was this just another game for him? Her mind raced with questions, but she kept quiet. She was still unsure whether to trust him. She had heard the rumors about him. The ruthless businessman who had built an empire but had no time for anything resembling real connections. They had said he was cold, calculating, and only interested in power and wealth. But as she looked at him now, she wasn't sure if that was the whole truth. William, too, was lost in thought. He couldn't help but wonder if this whole thing had been a mistake. But there was something about Claire that kept drawing him in, her honesty, her simplicity. He had been surrounded by so many superficial relationships, and here was a woman who didn't play the game. She was just herself. But what had he gotten himself into? As the evening wore on, the tension between them only grew. William stood by the window, looking out at the city skyline. Claire lay on the bed, unable to sleep, her thoughts swirling in her head. She had agreed to this, but now she wasn't sure if it had been for the right reasons. Was this just a way to escape her past, or was she truly ready for the consequences of what she had gotten herself into? Neither of them knew how this night would unfold. But as the clock struck midnight, they both realized that this was only the beginning of something far more complicated than either had imagined. The following morning, Claire woke up with a strange feeling in her chest. The events of the previous night felt like a dream, but the lavish room she was in told her otherwise. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft beams of sunlight across the room. William was already awake, standing by the window, his silhouette sharp against the golden light. She couldn't help but watch him, noticing the way his broad shoulders seemed to carry the weight of the world. He looked every bit the successful millionaire he was, yet there was something about him that seemed more distant than ever. He turned around when he felt her gaze on him. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. The tension was palpable, hanging thick in the air between them. William finally spoke, his voice steady, though there was a slight edge to it. "I didn't expect this to happen so quickly," he said, his tone almost apologetic. Claire didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to ask him why he had gone through with the bet in the first place, but another part of her knew that he probably wouldn't give her a satisfactory answer. Instead, she chose to remain silent. She wasn't sure what her place in all of this was, or what William's true intentions were. For a moment, it felt like they were strangers in their own marriage. "So what now?" Claire asked, breaking the silence. She couldn't hide the uncertainty in her voice. "What's the next step for us?" William took a deep breath, walking over to the bedside table and picking up his phone. "We have a few things to sort out. I have meetings today, and I assume you'll want some time to adjust." He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. There's no rush, Claire. Take all the time you need. She nodded, unsure whether she was relieved or disappointed by his response. The idea of staying in this strange, empty marriage felt like a trap, but at the same time, it was an opportunity. An opportunity to escape her past, to move forward with her life. But was she ready for what that would mean? As the day went on, William's business meetings took priority. Claire, left alone in the suite, wandered around the hotel. She tried to lose herself in the city, taking in the unfamiliar sights and sounds. Everything felt different now, more vibrant, but also more overwhelming. She had never imagined her life could change so drastically, so quickly. That evening, when William returned, he was more subdued than before. There was a noticeable shift in his demeanor. Gone was the confident millionaire who had offered her a life of luxury. Instead, there was a man who seemed uncertain, as though the weight of their marriage was beginning to sink in. "I've been thinking," he said as they sat down to dinner in there. "Sweet. About what happens next for both of us." Claire looked at him, waiting for him to continue. She wasn't sure what he was expecting, but she knew she needed to know where they stood. "This isn't just about the money, Claire," William added, his eyes meeting hers with a sincerity that surprised her. "I've realized that. I didn't just marry you for a bet. I don't know why I'm saying this, but I want to make sure you understand that this was never about using you. This is about both of us figuring out what we want from this." Claire felt a wave of emotion hit her, but she didn't let it show. She wasn't sure if she could trust him yet, but his words made her feel something she hadn't expected: hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to this than a simple wager. The evening ended quietly, with the two of them in the same room, but still miles apart. They had both agreed to this marriage, but neither of them fully understood what it meant yet. What started as a game had the potential to turn into something more, something neither of them could have predicted. Claire lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling. What was she really hoping for? Was it a chance at love? Or was it just the escape she had been waiting for all her life? She didn't have the answers, but one thing was clear: her life was no longer just her own. She had stepped into William's world, and now, it was up to her to navigate it. As the silence of the night settled over the room, Claire knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The following days passed in a blur, with William and Claire living in the same house, but worlds apart. The promise of something more lingered in the air, but neither of them knew how to bridge the gap between them. Claire spent her time exploring the vast mansion, finding new rooms to occupy and retreating into herself. She never imagined this kind of life. Luxury, yes, but it felt cold. William, on the other hand, stayed busy with work, his days consumed by meetings and phone calls, leaving him little time to truly focus on their new life together. As the days turned into weeks, Claire couldn't help but feel like a stranger in her own home. The wealth that surrounded her was a constant reminder of the difference between their worlds. She had grown up with nothing, and now, everything was laid out before her like a life she never dreamed she would have. But there was no joy in it. At night, as she lay in the enormous bed, she often thought about her past, the struggles, the pain, the constant fight to survive. And now, here she was, in a golden cage. The loneliness she had hoped to escape was still there, lurking. One afternoon, as William returned from another long day of meetings, Claire decided to confront him. She had to know where they stood, what this marriage really meant. He walked into the living room, his face tense, as always. "We need to talk," Claire said, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. William looked up, surprised by the seriousness in her tone. He set his briefcase down and sat across from her. "About what?" he asked, his voice guarded. "About us," she replied, her heart racing. "About what this is and what we're doing here. I agreed to marry you because I thought it was just a bet, but now," she trailed off, unsure of how to finish the sentence. William's expression softened slightly, but he didn't speak for a moment. He studied her carefully, almost as if he were seeing her for the first time. "I didn't expect this either," he finally said. "But things have changed. I know this was supposed to be a business arrangement, but I can't ignore the fact that we've both invested something in this. I've come to realize that it's not just about the money or the bet." Claire's heart skipped a beat. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? But before she could process his words, William continued. "I didn't marry you just for a wager, Claire, and I don't think I can just walk away from this, from you." The words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Claire didn't know what to say. She had spent so much time trying to keep her distance, to protect herself from getting too involved, but now William was asking her to step into something deeper, something she wasn't sure she was ready for. She stood up, pacing the room, trying to collect her thoughts. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice shaking. "What are we supposed to do now? I don't know if I can just pretend that nothing's changed." William stood up too, walking over to her. "I'm not asking you to pretend," he said softly. "I'm asking you to let me prove that this can be real. We don't have to have all the answers right now, but I want to try, Claire. I want to see where this could go." Claire felt a lump in her throat as she looked into his eyes. There was something there, something that felt genuine. For the first time since they had gotten married, she saw the possibility of something more. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but maybe, just maybe, it could be real. As she stood there, torn between fear and hope, William reached out, his hand gently brushing against hers. She didn't pull away. For the first time in a long while, she felt something stir within her, a spark of possibility. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let's try." And with that, the walls between them began to crumble, slowly but surely. They didn't know what the future held, but they both knew one thing. They were willing to find out together. The days that followed were different. Claire and William started to navigate their marriage with a new understanding. There were still moments of discomfort, of uncertainty, but something had shifted between them. William was no longer the distant, calculating man he had been when they first met. He was trying, in his own way, to show Claire that this marriage was more than just a business arrangement. He started spending more time at home, sharing details of his work with her, inviting her into parts of his life she never thought she would experience. Claire, too, began to let her guard down. She still didn't fully trust him, but she was beginning to believe that there was something real between them. She started to open up more about her past, her dreams, and the things that had shaped her. William listened, really listened, and for the first time in a long time, Claire felt seen. But there was still one thing she couldn't shake, the fear of being used. The fear that, at the end of it all, William might walk away once his curiosity had been satisfied. She couldn't let herself fall too deeply, not yet. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, the soft glow of the fireplace casting shadows on the walls, Claire broke the silence. "William," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "What happens when this whatever this is over? What happens when you've gotten what you wanted?" William's eyes met hers, and for a moment, he said nothing. The weight of her question hung in the air between them. He had always been good at getting what he wanted, but this was different. He didn't have an answer right away, and that surprised Claire. He took a deep breath, looking into the flames. "I don't know, Claire. I didn't think this through, and I've made mistakes. But I can't ignore what's happening between us. I don't want to lose that." The sincerity in his voice made Claire's heart race. She had expected him to brush it off, to deflect, but instead, he was admitting to his own uncertainty. It made her realize that maybe they were both in this together, unsure of what the future held, but willing to take the risk. "I'm scared," Claire said, her voice trembling. "Scared that I'll lose myself in this. That I'll forget who I am and what I came from." William reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. His touch was gentle, but it carried an unexpected strength. "You won't lose yourself, Claire. I won't let you. We're in this together, and I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in a long while, Claire felt a sense of relief wash over her. It wasn't a perfect promise, but it was enough. In that moment, she allowed herself to believe that maybe they had something real. Maybe this wasn't just a bet, or a game, but the beginning of something that could change both of their lives. The next day, they attended a charity event together. It was the first time they had been in public as a married couple, and Claire felt the weight of the eyes on them. The guests whispered, their curious gazes following them as they entered the venue. She had never felt so out of place, yet so oddly protected. William, noticing her discomfort, leaned in slightly, his voice low. "Ignore them. It's just noise. We're here for us, not them." His words brought her a sense of calm. As the night wore on, Claire found herself laughing with William, sharing moments of genuine connection. For the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider in this world of wealth and privilege. She felt like she belonged, like she and William were building something together. But as the evening drew to a close, The reality of their situation loomed large in Claire's mind. She wasn't ready to forget about her fears, but she was willing to take the next step. Maybe this marriage wouldn't be perfect, but it could be real. And for now, that was enough. As the weeks passed, Claire and William found themselves settling into a routine that, while far from perfect, felt like the beginning of something real. William continued with his demanding schedule, overseeing his businesses, managing his empire, but more and more, he made time for Claire. There were dinners together, long walks in the garden, and quiet evenings where they would sit side by side in silence. Yet it was a comfortable silence. It wasn't the perfect fairy tale, but it was theirs. Claire had begun to relax into this new life. She no longer felt like an intruder in William's world. She had found a place for herself, not just in his home, but in his life. She had started making small changes, even helping with some of the charitable events William was involved in. At first, it felt strange to be involved in the world of the rich, but she quickly realized how much good they could do with their resources. And through these interactions, Claire began to see another side of William, a man who was deeply invested in helping others, someone whose generosity was as real as his wealth. One afternoon, as Claire was planning an event for one of William's foundations, she received a call from her mother. The conversation was short but impactful. Her mother's health was declining faster than she had anticipated, and Claire felt a pang of guilt. She had come so far, yet there was still so much she hadn't been able to do for her family. The weight of it all hit her in that moment. She had left so much behind to step into this new world, but she couldn't escape the fact that her family still needed her. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was neglecting her roots. That evening, when William returned home, he noticed the change in her. Claire was quiet, lost in thought, something she hadn't been for a long time. "What's going on?" he asked gently, his voice full of concern. She looked up at him, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "My mom, she's not doing well. I need to go see her." William nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He walked over to her, placing a hand on hers. "I'll go with you," he said, his voice firm. "You're not in this alone." Claire was taken aback by his offer. She had never expected him to be so understanding, to offer his support without hesitation. But there was no mistaking the sincerity in his eyes. It was in that moment that Claire realized how far they had come. Their marriage, which had begun as a mere wager, had transformed into something neither of them could have predicted. William wasn't just a businessman to her anymore. He was her partner, someone who genuinely cared about her well-being. And perhaps, just perhaps, she could allow herself to care about him in return. Over the next few days, Claire and William traveled together to her family's home. The visit was emotional, as expected. Claire's mother, though frail, managed to smile when she saw her daughter. William, though he had his own reservations about the trip, was surprisingly supportive, staying in the background but offering his quiet presence. As Claire spent time with her mother, helping care for her and trying to make up for lost time, she couldn't help but think about the life she had built with William. The feeling of being cared for, of being supported, was something she hadn't known she needed. And now, she was finally starting to accept it. When they left, Claire felt a sense of peace. Her mother was still unwell, but Claire had done what she could for now. She had seen firsthand the love and care William was willing to offer, and it gave her hope for the future. As they drove back to the city, the tension between them that had once existed seemed to disappear. William and Claire no longer felt like two strangers bound by a bet. They were building something real, something that could last. For the first time, Claire allowed herself to believe in it. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that, whatever it was, she wouldn't have to face it alone. The next few weeks were filled with a quiet tension. Claire and William had come a long way, but the cracks in their relationship were beginning to show. Despite the progress they had made, there was still an unspoken wall between them. The past, the bet, the arrangement, still lingered in the background. It wasn't something they talked about, but it was there, like an elephant in the room. Claire couldn't help but wonder if William still saw her as the woman he had married for a challenge, a game, or if he truly saw her as someone he cared about. William, for his part, had grown fond of her, but he wasn't sure how to express it. His usual confidence had started to falter. He wanted more than just a partnership, but he didn't know how to ask for it without sounding like he was asking for too much. Everything they had built so far had been uncertain, and now, as the days went on, He realized that he didn't want to live with that uncertainty any longer. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Claire could feel the distance between them. She wasn't sure what was going on in William's mind, but the silence was enough to make her anxious. Finally, she decided to speak up. "William, we need to talk," she said, her voice shaky but firm. He looked up from the newspaper he had been reading, surprised by the seriousness in her tone. "About what?" he asked, setting it aside and giving her his full attention. "About us," she replied. "I know we've been trying to make this work, but I still feel like there's something missing. I don't want to keep pretending like everything's fine when it's not." William's expression softened. He had been waiting for this moment, but he didn't know if he was ready to face it. He had been trying so hard to make her feel secure, to show her that he cared, but maybe he hadn't done enough. "I don't want to pretend either," he said quietly. "I know I've made mistakes. I didn't think this would be easy, and I didn't expect to feel the way I do. But I don't want to lose you, Claire. Not now." Claire's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to say that. She had been bracing herself for the worst, but instead, he was admitting his own uncertainty. It was a relief, in a way. "I'm not going anywhere," she replied, her voice softening. "But I can't keep living in this limbo. We have to make a choice. We either move forward, or we walk away." William stood up, pacing for a moment. He didn't want to lose her, but he also didn't know if he was ready to give her everything she deserved. "I don't know what the right answer is," he said finally, turning to face her. "But I know that I want you. I want this to be real. I don't want to lose you because of the mistakes I've made." Claire looked at him, searching his eyes for sincerity. She saw it there. She saw the vulnerability he was hiding, and for the first time, she felt like they were both on the same page. "I want this to be real, too," she whispered. "I don't want to walk away. But we have to be honest with each other. No more pretending." William nodded, taking a step closer to her. "No more pretending," he agreed. In that moment, the walls between them came down. It wasn't perfect, but they had finally made a decision. They were going to fight for each other, for the life they were building together. It wouldn't be easy, but they were both willing to try. The next morning, as they sat down to breakfast together, there was a new sense of peace between them. It wasn't the perfect fairy tale they had imagined, but it was their story, and that was enough. They both knew that the road ahead wouldn't be without its challenges, but they were ready to face them, together. As the days passed, the decision they had made to stop pretending started to manifest in small, but significant changes in their lives. William and Claire began to spend more time together, not out of obligation, but because they genuinely wanted to. They would talk late into the night, sometimes about their pasts, sometimes about their dreams for the future. They laughed, they argued, but most importantly, they learned to understand each other. It wasn't always easy. William still had his moments of retreat, when the weight of his responsibilities would pull him back into the world of business, and Claire would be left to wonder where she stood. But those moments were fewer and farther between. One afternoon, William surprised Claire with a visit to one of his favorite spots, a small lakeside cabin that he had kept hidden from the world. It was simple, quiet, and peaceful, the kind of place where time seemed to slow down. As they sat together by the water, watching the sunset, Claire felt a sense of calm she hadn't realized she was missing. She turned to William, who was sitting beside her, his gaze focused on the horizon. "I didn't know you had this," she said, her voice soft. William glanced at her and smiled, a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. "I don't show this part of myself to many people, but it's always been my escape. A place to think, to be alone. But I think it's time to share it with you." Claire felt her heart soften. He was opening up to her, letting her into a part of his life that he had kept private. It was a small gesture, but to Claire, it meant everything. "Thank you," she whispered, feeling the weight of his words. "I don't know if I'm ready for everything, but I'm willing to try." William reached over, taking her hand in his. "You don't have to be ready for everything at once. We'll take it one step at a time. Together." They spent the rest of the evening at the cabin, talking, laughing, and watching the stars appear in the clear sky above. For the first time, Claire felt like she was no longer just a guest in William's world. She was a part of it, and he was a part of hers. That night, as they drove back to the city, there was a new sense of peace between them. The tension that had once defined their marriage had melted away. They had finally found common ground. A few days later, as Claire was preparing for another charity event, William surprised her with a gift. It was a small box, wrapped in simple brown paper. When Claire opened it, she found a beautiful necklace inside. "For you," William said softly, his eyes warm. Claire looked up at him, touched by the gesture. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice catching in her throat. "Why?" William smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkling. "Because you deserve it. You've made my life better in ways I never expected. You've made me see things differently." Claire felt a lump in her throat. She had never imagined that she would be here, in this life, with William, receiving gifts, but more importantly, receiving his affection and care. She had learned that love didn't have to be grand gestures or perfect moments. It was in the small things, in the quiet understanding they had found together. Later that evening, as they attended the charity event, Claire felt a new sense of confidence. She no longer felt like an outsider in this world. She was William's wife, and together, they were making a difference. As they mingled with the guests, Claire found herself smiling more freely, no longer burdened by the weight of their past or the fear of the future. They had chosen to move forward, and that decision had brought them closer than ever before. The evening ended with a quiet moment between them, standing on the balcony overlooking the city. William took her hand and pulled her close. "I don't know what the future holds," he said softly, "but I know I want to face it with you." Claire smiled, feeling the truth of his words deep in her heart. "I feel the same way," she whispered. They didn't have all the answers, but they were learning to walk through life together, step by step. And for the first time, Claire was certain that whatever came next, they would face it as a team. As time passed, Claire and William's bond deepened, growing stronger with each passing day. The once fragile foundation of their marriage had transformed into something solid, built on trust, understanding, and a shared commitment to building a life together. They had come a long way from where they started, from a bet that seemed like a fleeting joke to a partnership that held deep meaning. It wasn't always easy, but they had faced their challenges head-on and had emerged stronger for it. William, once a man who seemed to measure his worth by his wealth, now found himself drawn more to the quieter moments, sitting in the garden with Claire, sharing small jokes, or simply holding her hand as they walked through the park. He had learned that there was more to life than power and money. There was love, there was connection, and there was a sense of peace that he had never known before. For Claire, the journey had been just as transformative. She had entered the marriage unsure of herself, constantly questioning whether she truly belonged in William's world. But over time, she had learned to embrace it, not because of the luxury or the status, but because of the man she had come to know and love. She had learned that wealth was nothing without love and that she was enough, just as she was. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun dip below the horizon, William turned to Claire, his eyes soft and full of emotion. "Claire," he said, his voice steady but filled with meaning, "I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I'm grateful for everything you've brought into my life. You've shown me that there's more to this world than what I've built. You've made me a better man, and I can't imagine a future without you by my side." Claire looked at him, her heart swelling with emotion. She had always feared that her past would define her, but now, with William, she had found the courage to let go of those fears. "I feel the same way," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I've learned more about myself, about love, and about what truly matters. And I know that I'm ready to face whatever comes next, as long as I'm with you." William smiled, taking her hand in his. "Then let's take the next step together," he said, his voice full of resolve. "Let's build a future that's ours, not just built on the past or the things we've done, but on who we are and who we want to be." That night, as they lay in bed, Claire felt a peace she hadn't known in years. She had faced her fears, had learned to trust, and had built a life with someone who truly cared for her. The road they had traveled had not been easy, but it had led them to a place where they both felt truly alive. And as the years went on, Claire and William would continue to grow together, facing life's challenges with strength and love, knowing that they had built something far greater than either of them had ever expected. Their love was not born of a bet, but of choice, a choice to fight for each other, to understand each other, and to build a future filled with hope and possibility. In the end, they had found what they both had been searching for, not wealth, not status, but a love that was real, lasting, and true. In this captivating journey through love ambition, and self-discovery, we dive into one of the most unforgettable millionaire stories that shows how life can change unexpectedly. A young millionaire, driven by power and wealth, enters into a marriage with a woman he initially chooses as part of a bet. This millionaire story starts off as a game, but soon evolves into something deeper as both characters confront their fears, their pasts, and their futures. As the millionaire begins to unravel the complexities of genuine love, he learns valuable lessons about trust, vulnerability, and connection, ultimately redefining his life. The woman, once an outsider in a world of wealth, finds herself embracing this new life, slowly realizing that love and partnership can offer more than riches ever could. Throughout this millionaire story, both characters grapple with the walls they've built, learning that true happiness comes from facing their deepest fears and embracing each other for who they truly are. With every twist and turn, this millionaire story transforms into a beautiful narrative of growth, redemption, and love, showing that sometimes the greatest riches are not material, but emotional. Join us as we explore this powerful millionaire story that proves that even the most unlikely beginnings can lead to a love that changes everything. The bond between the millionaire and his wife grows through shared moments of vulnerability and understanding, showing us that no amount of money can replace the warmth and connection of a real relationship. This millionaire story is an emotional roller coaster that reminds us all that the true value of life lies in the people we choose to share it with, and the lessons we learn along the way.